Hello, everyone, and welcome to Orlando. I'm Ben Coleman, your host for Plane Time. And we're with you live and in the clear, Florida Aviation Network, and I want to take this time to thank all of the volunteers that's responsible to help make this whole process go like a Swiss clock. Speaking of Swiss clocks, we do have a very pleasurable program for you today, and we got Bob, we got George, we got Trevor. And we are going to have a ball today, and we're going to learn something about aviation. And we're going to learn something about us as people, and that's what really makes this whole thing click and tick. We are going to be going for about roughly 45 minutes to an hour, unless we get on a roll. We may be here for the rest of the day. But as far as you're concerned, you can play it back. You can go on our website and watch it again and again. Tell your friends about it, and it's going to be a very interesting show that you will not want to miss. I can't wait to get started. As a matter of fact, why don't we just get started now? Today, we have the pleasure of having Mr. Thom Richard. Thom.
Howdy.
Welcome to Plane Time.
Thank you, Ben.
Thom, we've been trying to pull this off for several years now, but it's the timing just really has not been there. It's either we've been ready and you weren't, you were ready, we weren't. So today we're going to make it happen. And we're going to talk about, we have a strong emphasis on everything we do here at Florida Aviation Network is about safety. And aviation is something that it's a tremendous feeling when you lift off and you go up into the heavens, if you will. The horrible side of that is when things go horribly wrong. And that's why we go to such great effort to make people stop and think about what they're doing. And Thom, you're affiliated with a little outfit I think called Warbird Adventures.
That's correct. We've been there for 24 years now.
24 years.
Yeah.
Well, you must have started that when you were only 6 years old.
Not quite, but I think I was 25.
And as far as the Swiss clock, I know that you kind of cringe a little bit. Where were you born, Thom? Tell us.
Well, I came from the other side of the pond. I came from Sweden. I was born and raised there, and I left for the United States when I was 17.
And we did develop this a little bit earlier about, Thom, when did you realize that you were going to be involved in aviation?
Well, as any kid, obviously airplanes are exciting. You know, everybody plays with small balsa wood airplanes, etc. But what really triggered me was an article I read about the 1979 Reno air races. And I must have read that article a dozen times, or mostly looked at the pictures, really, because it was so fascinating. Mm-hmm. I had no idea that something that exciting actually existed, that people were still at that time racing World War II airplanes. It was just a tremendous thing to me. And I decided right then and there that that's what I'm going to go do.
Well, by golly, you did, and
yeah.
And you're not done yet. You're not finished.
Far from
it. The whole thing about developing where you started is trying to explain to folks that if you have the interest, if you have the desire, if you have the passion, you can focus and you can do it too. If a little 7-year-old kid from Sweden can come over and when did you start the naturalization process? When you came in, and you are a U.S. citizen?
Yes, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. I started as soon as I got here, obviously. There was many steps involved, and it took about 15 years or so before I became a permanent resident and then later on citizen.
Well, and you were staying at of course, the finest suites and the finest hotels when you came into California and to start your flight training?
Yeah, not quite. I went about it a little different. I got student loans for the purposes of room and board, obviously, like one does when one goes to college. I spent that money on flight lessons, so I was homeless.
So when you say homeless, you were in a tent, or where?
No, I lived in the back of a hangar in my car, whatever it took, because my goal was aviation, and I wanted to spend every dime and every minute of effort on pursuing that dream, not anything ancillary such as, sleep or food.
Food.
It was less important to me.
Yeah. Food's not that important.
Right.
But do you know your way around a broom? Did you find a broom that would fit your hands?
That's pretty much how it started. Yeah. You gotta clean airplanes and push airplanes around and clean the shop floor, whatever it takes to get your flight time, right?
Okay, Thom, 17 is when you embarked on this portion of your, but between 7 and 17, there's 10 years.
Yeah.
What did you do in that 10 years? You speak exceptionally good English.
Thank you. Everything I focused on, wanted to focus on, obviously there was a road there, and doing well in school was a big part of that. Obviously, you're not going to do well in aviation unless you do well in school. You're not going to do well in aviation unless you speak good English. So I started learning English in 3rd grade, like we do back home. And I specifically steered towards American English. We're supposed to learn British English in school over there, but I steered away from that and I aimed for the American side of things. And obviously, as soon as I got here at 17, the very first thing I did was buy a car. Obviously, you have to have a car in the land of the automobile, and it had a cassette player. And I bought 2 stand-up routines from the very famous Eddie Murphy. And I was able to mimic everything he said in the first 3 months, and that's how I got rid of my accent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But there is one exception that I guess the British English is what they try to.
Yeah.
But people haven't learned how to speak the proper English, and I actually learned my proper English in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and that's where you actually learn the true pronunciation of words like Tar Heel. And it was real interesting. The other day in a store, I introduced myself, and I said, well, "What's your name?" Ben Coleman. Dan Coleman? No, Ben Coleman. And they couldn't get Ben. And I said, "Ben." Oh, like Obie Young pronounces my name, Ben. So, but anyway, how do you get? It's got to be interesting coming from a foreign country and learning English, and then you go to Arkansas or Alabama, and it's a whole different kind of English that we speak.
Sure, yeah, of course. I mean, you have dialects over here, but we have actually, Sweden has 24 different dialects, even though the country's only the size of California. So I understand the differences. They're big.
It's big.
Yeah.
And Thom, the reason I've developed all of that is the importance that, like you were talking earlier about English being the aviation language is English. It's worldwide. Mm-hmm. And it's very, very discouraging when you're on frequency and you hear someone struggling hard.
Yeah, I mean, there is a very good reason why the FAA requires you to read, speak, and understand the English language, because we're all in this together. And if there's miscommunications, that's how accidents happen. And we have a strict rule in our hangar to only speak English. We don't speak other language, even though we're capable of. In case there is somebody overhearing you to know something more than you do about the subject at hand. So nothing is missed that way. It's very important.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of your hangar, tell us what you do at Warbird Adventures.
Well, Warbird Adventures is a flight school. We teach people how to fly vintage aircraft, specifically tail draggers. So we start people out in the Citabria for private pilot training, and we graduate them to the Super Decathlon for their aerobatic training. Sometimes we do the aerobatic training before they finish their private. That's the way we go about it. We like to say that we teach people the right way to fly. Mm-hmm. And then we graduate you into the T6. That's the best advanced trainer ever made. Nothing even compares. We have a couple of them. And of course, we go all the way up to the fighter in the shape of a P-40.
Thom, some people may not realize what a T6 actually is. I'm going to be so bold and the camera folks are just going to freak out. But I'm going to put that airplane there. Tell us a little bit about the T6.
The T6 is the only aircraft to ever have been coined the pilot maker. And it's an aircraft where if you learn to, I shouldn't say master it, because that's really something that doesn't happen. But once you fly a T6 well, you find that you will fly everything else that you fly better. There's no aircraft that has such an impact on your piloting skills as the T6 does. Nothing comes close. It was the aircraft in World War II that washed out more pilots than all other aircraft combined. It's a hurdle. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of diligence to fly the T6 correctly. And it's not that it's inherently difficult. That's not the problem. It's incredibly unforgiving. The T6 doesn't let you get away with anything. If you do something wrong, it's simply just going to slap you right across the face. So you will learn how to fly an airplane properly very quickly in the T6. It's an absolutely wonderful machine.
Produced by the fine folks at North American?
That is correct. They had started production in 1939. They built 17,000 of them. They ceased production in 46, and they were in service up through 1956 or so in the U.S., and then across the world at various air forces. I think there were 34 different countries that served in. The last one was South Africa, and they retired them in 1995.
Wow, that's recent.
Yes.
Relatively speaking, it's recent.
Yeah.
But it's been a good ride for the. Tell me the difference between. I just noticed here the SNJ.
Yeah, Secret Navy Jet.
Secret Navy Jet.
No, it stands for Scout, Trainer, in North American. N is the code for trainer, and J was the code for North American. So it's a Scout Trainer.
See, I told you would. And the 6 is probably the 6.
That's the model. So that's the last one built, the SNJ 6, and that's specifically what we have exclusively in our fleet, our SNJ 6s.
I'm going to put this back over in the hangar.
All right.
But see, I told you were going to learn something today. I told you. And, so we're going to learn more too about the how do we bring people into this industry and do it the proper way. Mm-hmm. How do we recruit people?
Well, a big part of our operation is recruitment. We have a strong belief that if you introduce a person to the exciting end of aviation, such as seaplanes, helicopters, tail draggers, aerobatics, warbirds, you name it, people have a much higher likelihood of continuing their pursuit of aviation versus flying, let's say, your average little bug smasher, where it may not be as exciting on your first flight. Say, yep, this may not be for me. It's a little too boring. But when they see the exciting end, they're willing to go through those steps, get their licenses in order to get to those goals and achieve the same things that they did on their introductory flight. So recruitment is a very big part of our operation. We not only teach at our location, but we also travel to a lot of air shows and other aviation events with our aircraft. As you saw in the introduction, I perform in the P-40, for example, aerobatic air shows. And in between the flights, or before and after the show, we offer flights to the public. We invite people to come in, put them in the cockpit, put their hands on the controls under the tutelage of an instructor, and teach you how it's done. And we will teach you aerobatics right off the bat on the very first flight. If you want to go to loops and rolls like you just saw me doing the air show, we'll show you how. And that ignites the spark. It is our effectiveness of recruiting people to their private pilot's licenses, not only for our flight school, but for the local flight school at the air show, is very, very high, much higher than any normal flight school. And flight schools need to think about that. They need to have an exciting end to their operation for the purposes of recruitment. We chose Warbirds and aerobatics. There are many others, of course, but that's how you ignite that spark.
You have many certificates in your pocket
Yes.
For aviation. And out of all of those certificates, which one is most important to you? And remember, we're an aviation safety maintenance show. So tell me about which one is most important.
Well, I'm going to have to object now because there's two. There's not one. There's two. There's your CFI and there's your ANP.
Yeah.
They're equally important, I believe, for your success in aviation.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Maintenance. How these Warbirds? These are limited category aircraft.
Some are,
for the most part.
Limited or standard.
Okay.
There are experimentals as well, but we don't operate those because that's not legal for commercial purposes.
Got it. They maintain themselves, don't they?
Oh, clearly, yeah. You put them away in the hangar and they fix themselves. Yes.
Yeah. They maintain all the brakes and
Right.
all the little orifices in the carburetor. They just take it.
Right. Now, the amount of hours we spend per flight hour is a very high number. It takes a lot of work to keep, especially older aircraft, going. But any aircraft, you can't just let anything sit. It's simply going to fall apart with time. So it requires a lot of attention, and you got to have a dedicated staff that knows that model. And that's why we have narrowed our scope to Warbirds and vintage aircraft. That's what we play with. We don't do everything. We concentrate on what we're good at, and that's Warbirds and tail draggers, small tube and fabric, that type of aircraft. And we hold out to do maintenance on other people's aircraft as well, but only that scope. We don't, don't bring me a business jet or a brand new Cirrus. That is not what we do. There are experts in those fields, and those are the people that should be working on them. Our expertise is different. So that's where that's our wheelhouse.
And tell me a little bit more about the aspects of the P-40, because that's out of all of the aircraft, and we have, everyone enjoys the sound of 12 cylinders humming through the air. P-51, the sound of freedom, and that is probably the most iconic warbird out there. However, I have learned a lot about the P-40 since I've kind of been hanging around Warbird Adventures.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about why the P-40 is so important to Thom Richard.
Well, I fly various warbirds, not just my own, but other people's as well. And after having been around the field for a while, I realized that my absolute favorite aircraft to fly in the world, period, and if there's only one I have to fly for the rest of my life, it would be the P-40. It is the most wonderful flying machine. I equate it to the pits of the warbirds. It's the most aerobatic, wonderful controls, and it's got tremendous power to weight ratio. It's an awesome little airplane. And cost-wise, it is manageable for a fighter. Fighters are extremely expensive aircraft to operate, but out of the selection of fighters that are out there, the P-40 is one of the most economical.
Why is that?
It has an engine that runs like a sewing machine. You turn it on and it just goes. The big radials and the Merlin, for example, they require a lot more maintenance. Their schedules are such that they have many reoccurring inspections that the robust Allison doesn't need. So the maintenance schedule is much friendlier on this airplane. It's a very simple, straightforward V12 with a single stage, single speed supercharger, no frills, very robustly built. As a matter of fact, when you see the racers in Reno with the run Merlins, they take a lot of Allison parts and put in them because they're sturdier. So that part's it's really wonderful. The entire airplane is a very 4313 type machine, very standard. There is no special stuff on it. Everything is exactly like 4313 is laid out. So maintenance-wise, it's pretty good. Now, that doesn't mean it's cheap to operate, but compared to others, it's manageable.
Reasonable and cheap is it's affordable.
Yeah.
More affordable than
less expensive.
Less expensive.
Yeah.
And this is one for Bob Jex and Tony Alfea and all those other guys. But you just threw out something that we just in the maintenance world you throw out 4313. 4313.
That's our Bible.
4313. What is 4313?
That is the acceptable methods that we perform maintenance. You can look up pretty much anything in that wonderful book. It came about a long time ago. They figured this out a while back. And it's a great resource for pretty much anything and everything you want to see. If you have any questions on standards, hardware, techniques, everything is in there.
Repairs.
It's the Bible. Yeah.
It is the acceptable methods and techniques for repair of aircraft. And as a matter of fact, it's something that it's an AC, it's an advisory circular, 43.13. And whatever revision we're up to, I think we're Bravo now, coming up Charlie. Then we'll go to Delta, then we'll go to Echo, and I look forward to all these revisions coming up on AC 43.13. There's something else that you didn't think you were going to learn today. The aircraft performance, help me with a little bit on the speeds, because I have, I'm going to cash in some, Melody's going to let me buy an hour of flight instruction.
All right.
And thank you very much, Melody. And where am I going to start in this airplane as far as getting to know it?
Well, it's all about the T6. You need to graduate out of the T6 program to get into the P-40. That's what makes sense. That's what they did in World War II. And the P-40 was the only aircraft in World War II on the fighter side that we had that came in a two-seat dual control model. They realized they had a lot of takeoff and landing accidents because of the narrow gear, high CG, tons of power situation, and people weren't used to it. So they developed a two-seater. The aircraft has excellent performance. If you leave the power up, which we don't, but if you did, you'd get to 15,000 feet in 5.1 minutes. So
That's pretty good. That's rapid climb.
yeah, it's a pretty good performer.
How much power? What are we talking about? Horsepower?
It's about 1,325 or so on takeoff. We don't run it there, and in cruise we usually develop about 750 or so. With that, we true out at 290 miles an hour, 12.5. That's usually we flight plane about a gallon a minute. And I said economical for a fighter. That's pretty good.
A gallon a minute.
Yeah.
That's not bad, really,
Yeah.
when you stop and think about it. Compared to, give us a comparison.
Yeah, Corsair is 50% more, for example. It's a gallon and a half a minute. It adds up.
And those are numbers that we don't think about every day.
Right.
And just like the jet airliners and how when you go off on a trip and how, say, pulling back just a couple percent can make a big, big difference in the bottom line.
Yeah, we have the same issue with range on Warbirds. And the P-40 is not known for range, so we have to really manage and plan our fuel stops for that reason, and weather, of course.
Does it like 100 low lead or
Yes,
what type
100
of fuel?
low lead is what we run, and we can do full power with that.
Interesting. And as far as getting the other octane fuels these days, how hard is it to get the 130? And I know,
Well, 115, 145, or 100, 130, those are no longer in production except for the Reno air races. They even have something as high as 160 octane there we use for racing. But it's done in very small batches, and it's exceedingly expensive. It's well over $20 a gallon right now.
wow, whoa,
So that's not something that is readily available. But the Allison does very well with 100 low lead, so that's not a problem for us. We
good.
hope that the 100 low lead production will continue for a long time because we need it.
Well, if we are successful at recruiting enough people to come and backfill when some of those old timers get out of it, we have hope.
Yeah.
We have hope that's going to happen. It's a very, very passionate industry, as we know. You keep mentioning Reno air races. You came back age 7, and that's what kind of set you on your
Yep.
course. Reno air races is, well, it's the only place in the world that they do that in the Valley of Speed. Tell us a little bit about your experience with Reno.
Yeah, so I started racing in the small Formula One class. That's the 0200 powered fixed gear single engine, mostly tail dragger class. The aircraft weigh 500 to 600 pounds, they're very tiny. We do a racehorse start. That means 8 aircraft on the runway at the same time. They drop the flag, we pour the coals to it, and enter the course. 8 laps later, whoever crosses the finish line first wins. It's not about speed, it's about placement. Very exciting, and we actually had a World Series going for a while with it, and we did very well. Then there are 6 different classes in Reno. I've raced 3. The second one was the jet class. Those are the L-39s, TS-11s, that type of aircraft. Straight wing, non-afterburning jets, which is great fun. But obviously the coveted class is the Unlimiteds. And the Unlimiteds is a class with 2 rules. Everything else goes. That is, it has to be piston powered and it has to be propeller driven. Beyond that, you can enter anything you want over 4,500 pounds. That's a safety rule. So it's Mustangs, Bearcats, Sea Furies, that type of aircraft, generally speaking. The World War II fighters, those are still today the fastest piston-powered aircraft ever built. There even are P-40s racing in the class. And that may be the most exciting thing you can do in aviation.
Go fast, turn left.
With your hair on fire.
Okay. It's and I can't play dumb about this. I did enjoy working with your team with Precious Metal. And one thing that I noticed, Thom, is in this industry, in aviation, pilots always, for some reason, walk around and they can strut a little bit, strut their stuff. And what's the difference between cocky and confident?
Well, cocky is simply an attitude, right? That's something you make yourself out to be, whereas confidence is something that you've created and that's come over time and experience. It's it's not about being arrogant. Being confident is important because you have to be assertive in this business, right? You have to take command over situations at times. Sometimes they're awful situations, right? You got to deal with them. So you can't be meek and reserved in those situations. You have to be confident in your ability to do things, right? But cocky is something really bad. That's where you can get in a lot of trouble and in over your head very fast. And you have to check your ego all the time, especially when you fly hardware like this or go racing in Reno, for example, because you can get hurt very quickly. You got to be careful. And so I don't want to call it a fine line. It's really not. You just got to keep policing yourself and accept it when other people call you on it. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to do as a person, right? But you try.
Well, one thing that I noticed with the precious metal team, well, actually, all of your teams, Hot Stuff, is even though you are in charge, you have to work with your volunteers and your people and show them how important they are. And that's one thing that I always noticed about, if anyone ever thought that Thom Richard was full of himself, Thom is not really full of himself, he's full of the world. And that's one thing that I noticed is your ability to share that with your team. And I think that's why folks enjoy working on your team so much. It was truly a team effort, and that's something that I hope that we develop that spirit with our recruitments that come up. And I encourage you to tell us a little bit about what happens at Warbird Adventures to instill that type of passion.
Yeah, I mean, I am in this business to share what I do. I'm excited about what I do, and I want more people to come in and join me. That's the point, right? It's not for me to keep everybody else out. That's not the idea. Flying is a social thing, and we want to get people excited about it and continue the legacy, right? So shunning people or keeping people on the other side of the fence doesn't make sense to me. I think bringing them in and get them excited about it so they can be productive not only for the effort at hand, but for their future, perhaps. You know, maybe go get their AMP or get their private pilot's license or go race Reno, whatever it takes, right? And we have brought up a lot of people through the team that way, and a lot of them become pilots and aircraft mechanics. And as a matter of fact, everybody on my staff right now were brought up from within. They showed up with nothing, and now they're flight instructors. They're my director of maintenance, for example. He was a volunteer on the race team before he had an AMP, and so on. And I think it's really important.
It is very important. And Thom, the whole thing we talk about is safety. And as we discussed a little bit earlier, when you break down the definition of the term safe, is free from harm. We're not free from harm sitting in this studio right now.
It doesn't exist.
No.
It's all about calculated, accepted risks. I choose to do something because I think it's worth it. For example, crossing the street. I want to get to the other side because for me, it's worth crossing in front of those cars to achieve that goal. For me, it was worth racing around the pylons in Reno for the reward that it gave me. So it's all a level that you have to be comfortable with. So, but you got to be prepared to be there, right? You can't just jump into it without any regard. You have to work your way up to it, build your confidence level, your capabilities. The maintenance side is huge on this. Obviously, we kept working on things until we ran out of excuses not to go fly it. That was the rule in the hangar. When we tested something new, it's when we couldn't figure out why we shouldn't go fly it. That's when we went and flew it. So that's the approach to safety in regards to high risk activities like racing.
Well, and share with us just a little bit, because not everyone in this studio set has had the benefit of being up on a wing and pulling some pretty substantial G's. What is it like when you're going around in the unlimited class, shooting around those 8 pylons? What do you feel? How much pressure is being exerted, and how important is it to trim that aircraft?
So I raced a P-51 Mustang, and the Mustang is a very heavy airplane on the controls, even in normal flight. So when we get up to 450 or maybe even 500 miles an hour, it's really a stick in concrete aircraft. I tend to fly the airplane with both hands for stability. We're going through some pretty severe turbulence down low. You know, we're 50 feet off the deck at times. And it's always in the afternoon in the desert, so the winds pick up 25, 30 knots generally, so that it tumbles across the rolling hills around Stead Airfield. So it could be I don't want to call it a hair-raising ride, but it's certainly not smooth, right? So you got to be on, and you have to work the airplane pretty hard. Trim is important. There are 3 turns, and we do 4.5, maybe 5 Gs in the turns at times. It depends on the speed of the airplane. The slower airplanes obviously don't pull as hard because they don't bank as hard. So it depends on how your airplane's performing that day. But as far as feeling is concerned, it's a very sterile environment. You don't really concern yourself with either enjoying it or being scared of what you're doing. That's not the point. You're there to do a job. It's a very sterile cockpit, not unlike an airliner, right? You do this in order to accomplish that. If something goes wrong, you need to compartmentalize and deal with that issue and so on. When you land and walk away from the airplane, then you look back and think, wow, that was exciting. Or, ooh, that was scary. I need to pay attention to this next time. You know, you cannot let feelings, with good or bad, interfere with what you're doing in such a critical environment such as air racing. So people ask me if I'm having fun up there. I say, absolutely not. It's not fun at all. It's not fun until after you get back on the ground. Or if I was scared, I'm never scared. Never been scared in precious metal. I was scared afterwards sometimes.
Yeah, you can't get caught up in the moment, I'm
No,
sure.
absolutely not.
But now it's got to be very, very comfortable. And they've got a nice sling to sit in, sit on a parachute, nice cushy parachute. And there's nothing to do but just throttle and stick. I mean, that's it, isn't it?
No, it's a pretty serious management system. Yeah, I think I had 7 temperatures and 14 pressures to monitor on the engine. It's all about engine management. There's no automation in this airplane. Everything is analog, and you adjust as necessary depending on what the situation is. And it's about bringing that engine up to a limit without blowing it to get the best performance possible. So I liken flying an unlimited aircraft in Reno to swerving in and out of highway traffic while texting. That's about how busy it is in the cockpit. You're spending a lot of time inside the cockpit while you're flying uncooperative formation, trying to get around the airplane next to you. So very busy.
And how about temperature controls? Tell us a little bit about some of the valves that you're having to operate.
Yeah, so precious metal is
manipulate
pretty
while you're
complicated because it's not an air-cooled engine. It's a liquid-cooled engine. So we have a massive radiator, and there's also a big oil cooler. So depending on the power that you're putting into the engine, the temperatures are going to change. And you change the airflow over the radiators by means of 2 exit doors. So you have the radiator door and you have the oil cooler door, and then you also have spray bars in front of each of them, which is water being sprayed on the radiator for evaporative cooling, which is much more effective than just air. And that amount of water has to be regulated somehow. So in my airplane, that was all manuals. I had to sit there and dial the valves back and forth depending on flows and pressures and the temperature and how much you had left, because you had to keep enough to complete the race. So there was a bit of planning involved, or a lot, through the race, so you don't run out until after you cross the finish line. We would lose about 1,500 pounds of fluids in a race between the avgas, the 160 octane stuff we mentioned earlier, the water for the spray bar, the anti-detonant injection fluid, which is a mixture of methanol and water that's sprayed into the carburetor intake, because when you squeeze air by means of the supercharger at those rates, it gets very hot. And you can't put a hot charge into an engine without it detonating. So you have to chill it down, and that's done by means of methanol and water right into the intake. And it's a remarkable thing how effective it is. So we run manifold pressures in Reno. In precious metal, we brought it up all the way to 120 inches in testing. There are airplanes that do 145, maybe even 150 inches, which is remarkable, thinking that, you know, a normally aspirated engine maxes out about 28, 29, right? So it's a big deal. Very complex piece of machinery.
Interesting. And as far as the procedures that go, I think we have a clip and hot stuff that we can talk about the importance of maintenance and when things are not working just the way that they should, and the decisions you have to make before you take off in any aircraft. Even your car, you got to make a decision when you start your car up. If it's not going to be running right or you feel a flat, you're out of the race. I'd like to go through, and they're going to queue up and show this collision, if you will, and share with us. We're going to talk over this, and I will be quiet and I'll let you kind of narrate what was kind of going through your mind as we do this.
Grid start. Read the lane. Realized I got a crossfire. As I realized the stop propeller on the line indicates to the flag man that I have to be pushed off and put the reserve on. Well, there was a miscommunication among the flagmen, and they started the race. I'm holding the canopy up to be visible to the airplanes behind me. Well, this guy didn't see me. So that was an exciting day. You see him skidding to a stop on the other side. Luckily, neither one of us were hurt seriously. I was hit on my hand by his wing, but other than that, there were no injuries. But that's how quickly things go wrong, because we had a crossfire in the ignition system, and then there was a miscommunication failure that didn't stop the race.
And it's all about procedures.
Yes, that's correct.
And we work really hard to prevent that from happening. And when there's a breakdown, we have to go in to find what was the root cause of the breakdown. And can you share with us what was determined?
Yeah, so there was a long investigation. There were about 10 things. As I always say, chain of events when it comes to aircraft accidents, right? That could have prevented this from happening. Had that chain not been complete, this wouldn't have happened. So they reviewed this for a very long time, and they played out a lot of scenarios, and they came up with some changes to the procedures to prevent this from ever happening again. So it was a learning experience for all of us. We were just lucky that nobody got hurt any worse.
Well, it could have been, like you said, a lot worse, and we're glad that it wasn't worse. And I do know that he came over immediately. A lot of camaraderie out there, and he was very concerned about your health.
Yes, of course.
How are you?
Yes.
And normally people would say, they're going to have a fist fight. Like NASCAR, some of those fist fights I think are maybe a little bit staged, but there's a lot of passion in the racing environment, and there's a lot of adrenaline.
Yeah.
And your adrenaline meter had to have been pretty well spiked when that happened.
Well, mine wasn't, because I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought he was going to fly right by me. That didn't happen, so it was a complete surprise at that point. And of course, I was still working the procedure. You have to shut down the aircraft, make sure there's no fire. And in this case, I had an injury I had to brace. But obviously, I couldn't see him behind me, so I was very concerned with where he went. I didn't, since I was flipped around so quickly, I had no clue where he ended up or what happened to him. So, but they clarified that very quickly, that he was fine. So the only injury was my banged up hand.
How is it now?
Oh, it's back to 100%.
All right, good. That was close.
Doesn't get much closer.
That was close. Well, no. Well, it wasn't close. It was a hit. It was a full-fledged collision.
That was correct.
But you learned a lot that day.
Yeah.
You learn a lot every day, I guess, that when you're out pushing. And some people say, well, that's just nuts. That's crazy to do that. You do push the envelope, but it's not that you're an adrenaline junkie. It's that it is exciting, or else we wouldn't do it.
It's true.
That's why that's the passion, and maybe that's why Americans have such a drive for trying to achieve things.
Yeah, you want to set out to accomplish something in life, right? You don't want to sit on your couch all your days and waste away. That's not
Eat potato chips and playing games.
Right. So there are a lot of kids, and they ask me, how do you do this? I said, well, you simply just take the first step and keep moving in that direction. Eventually, be careful what you wish for, because it just might happen. And that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't know what the path was going to be. I certainly didn't expect to go along the route that I went, but it did happen eventually.
Well, but it takes a lot of focus and,
Sure does.
Determination, drive. Is it expensive? It's all relative. They're printing money as we sit here. It's just trying to figure out how to. It's not what you make; it's how much you keep.
Yeah, well, there you go.
So, but we do enjoy this industry and this passion, and sharing it. That's why, again, I want to always focus on where we're going next. What's the next step? What's the next phase in the Warbird adventure chronology?
Well, we have a very exciting step coming up, and we've been something I've been planning for years, really. But with COVID, it finally came to a head, and I decided, we're not going to get any younger. It's time to start moving, and literally moving. We are taking our entire operation, lock, stock, and barrel, and we are moving out into the country. We're getting our own airstrip, grass strip in South Carolina, just west of the capital, Columbia. And we're going to be expanding our operation. People are asking me, are you shutting down? Are you downsizing? And not at all. It's the other direction. We're going to get bigger and better and more exciting. We're going to continue our flight school exactly the way we're doing it now. We're going to bring our Citabria Super Decathlon, the T6s and the P40. We're going to be operating off of this grass field that we found. But we're going to expand into other realms of aviation. So we'll be announcing those over the next year. So stay tuned. It's going to be fun. But in the meantime, we are, instead of being in the thriving metropolis of Central Florida, which is really what it is, right? The greater Orlando area, Kissimmee. We're going to be out in the country. And the reason for being out in the country is because we want our own aerobatic box. That's part of the flight school. We want to be offering aerobatic training in the box. We want to be offering aerobatic competitions. We want to be offering SAC training. That's statement of aerobatic competency. That's what's required of an airshow pilot to do what you saw in the introduction. So you have to qualify at certain levels, and that can only be done in waivered airspace because it is illegal to perform aerobatics below 1,500 feet. So this box we're going to use for all those purposes, and then hopefully down the line we're going to use it to host our own air shows. That is the goal of the property. So right now, it has accommodations, and we will be able to accommodate our customers coming in for their courses, whether it's private pilot or T6 courses, what have you. So we'll be able to put them up. We have a turnkey facility there now with hangars and offices for our flight school. And the runway currently is 3,300 feet long. It's not quite long enough for what we want it to be, so we're going to extend it to 43 as soon as we get there. So hopefully we'll have a 4,300-foot runway by the end of this year. And then in the future, we're going to try to extend it on the other end and make it 5,500. And when we reach that goal, we're going to start hosting air shows.
Can I ask our esteemed crew to go back on the plate on camera one to talk a little bit more about this? Because this, Thom, there's not much that gets me excited anymore. As I've been around the block. But this is exciting. Because how many acres do you have at your discretion here?
It's about 100 acres, and there's no picture of the runway there, but that's the location. It's actually a pretty good place to be. It's free and clear airspace. We can do aerobatics right on top of the airport. Building the box will be no problem at all. We'll just work with our local FSDO for that. It's an hour drive out of Columbia. As I mentioned, that's where the closest commercial airport is. There's also Charlotte and Charleston, of course. But if you really have trouble finding an airline connection, Atlanta is only a 3-hour drive.
That's not far.
No. So it's exactly 400 miles north of where we are right now. So it's also going to enable us to reach air shows a lot easier being halfway up the East Coast. It's another motivator for moving north a little bit. It's still in good weather, but far up north so we can avoid the panhandle line of thunderstorms in the afternoon, which makes it very difficult for these types of aircraft to transition north and south. So we're going to dart out to air shows and come back. It's going to be a much more convenient location for us.
And I keep hearing that I see numbers. I see numbers. I see the number 96.
Yes.
What does 96 have to do with it?
Well, 96 is the name of a local town. It has a lot of Revolutionary War and Civil War history. There's about a half a dozen different theories as to why it's called 96, and none of them are true. Nobody knows.
So you can make up your own, and
Yeah,
there'll be
the
more.
etymology of the name is fascinating. It's on the list of the most unique town names in the United States.
Interesting. And the another thing that you mentioned that I want to develop is grass.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually turf.
Yes.
And the turf, I was asked as a aircraft representative, manufacturer representative, says I need to know what the performance factor is of my aircraft on a grass strip. I said, okay, we'll be glad to provide that to you. You give me the type of grass, the height of the grass, the sublayment underneath the grass. Is it sand? Is it clay? Is it soil? What is it? So there's so many variables that it's just very difficult to give performance other than you fly. The airplane flies when it's ready to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And after you do it a few times, you realize how much it's going to take reasonably. Right now you have how about 33,000?
I wish we had 33,000. No, 3,300.
3,300.
Yeah.
3,300. You're going to 4,300?
That is correct, right away.
Okay. Any plans to go 5,300?
55 is our goal.
55.
Yes.
Okay, that you got a 5,500 foot turf runway.
Mm-hmm.
It's got good support. That'll accommodate just about anything you want to put in.
And that's exactly the plan. We're hoping to have some big airplanes come in there in the future.
Something I didn't realize, and I just started work with an Italian company, and the production facility doesn't have a paved runway. They fly all of their aircraft off of turf, off a grass runway, and I just find that's just lovely.
Well, that's how it always was. That's how it used to be.
Yeah.
There were no paved runways in the beginning.
No, the P-40 we're looking at here,
Mm-hmm.
it likes grass.
It loves grass.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Most airplanes like grass,
Yeah.
except for on taking off, particularly the nose, the tricycle gear aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just so much fun to be had in this industry,
Mm-hmm.
and it's always a pleasure to see outfits that like to promote that fun. What do you do? How do you recruit people to come to Warbird Adventures? Does it just happen?
Yes, it does just happen. Word of mouth is by far our biggest advertisers. People that's flown with us or seen us that mention it to others, and they show up as well, just for the great times of what these aircraft can provide. You know, the vehicle, the airplanes, they are the vessel for the excitement. We're just there to keep you safe, right? There's a lot of attraction with warbirds and vintage aviation, and we need to keep that alive.
Well, and funny you should mention that, because there's a lot of folks that are saying, warbirds they're going to go away. This is just not enough. It's too expensive. There's not enough parts, and they're just going to go away. They're going to, like the dinosaur, they're just going to drift off somewhere.
Well,
Is that true?
No, that is not yet true. We will definitely be flying warbirds for the next 50 years, without a doubt. There's plenty of parts and support for most of these aircraft. As long as we have gasoline to burn, they're going to be around. Costs are going to go up, but so does everything, right? So everything is more expensive today than it was 20 years ago. So that's the norm. But that doesn't mean it's impossible to get into. So and that's what we're here for.
Well, and I'm going to share something with you that you're probably going to want to pay me for this, but I'm not going to accept any payment. It's all about value and what we value in life. And this is the cost of being involved with these machines. But look at the value that you get. I mean, of retention, of excitement. And what's it worth if we can't enjoy it and have fun with it? And money is just, like I said, it's just money, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a necessary evil, right? Or means to an end. I tell people all the time when it comes to risk and value and money and so on, you should never be afraid of dying, but you should be terrified of not living. And flying warbirds is pretty good living.
Well, if we're not careful, Thom, someday we are going to die.
Well,
you got to be
the
very
chances are-
careful.
Chances
very
are.
careful.
I think you about 100% chance of that. Yeah.
But it's what we do in the meantime is
Right.
what really counts.
Right.
And again, everybody in this whole assembly here has similar passion. So it's like the birds of a feather, as they say.
Yep.
So, Thom, the thing that most sticks out with your operation is again the feeling that you get when you walk through your doors. And is there anything other than just airplanes to look at there?
Oh yeah, we have tons of things. It's about the stories. You know, the World War II primarily is our focus, of course. But yeah, we've had an exhibit now for coming up on 20 years in our hangar. We call it Kissimmee Air Museum. So we have various artifacts from Pearl Harbor, for example, of one of a kind. We have a fantastic Pacific timeline and what happened here in Florida at the time of World War II. Kissimmee, of course, was an air base, just like many other general aviation airports today started. Did you know there was only 17 air bases in Florida at the start of World War II? And at the end, we had 322.
Wow.
They did night fighter training in Kissimmee, so it was secret. So the unfortunate part about that is cameras were not allowed, so we don't have any pictures from what happened in Kissimmee in World War II. But we have a lot of history in the surrounding area, and we visit those airfields, of course, in our training, which is fascinating. And we have a bunch of engines and other artifacts on display. We're going to take most of our things with us to South Carolina, but we're not going to open a museum there. But we are going to have things on display as a backdrop to our operation, which I think is very appropriate.
Well, it's got to be devastating to pull out and talk about moving, because I mean, your staff, they're going to scatter and go somewhere. You have to lay everybody off.
Not a chance. They are all coming with me.
Really?
Yes. Very dedicated crew we have.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. So you're
Yeah,
not eliminating positions.
Not at all. No,
If anything,
they're all very excited. We're going to be adding.
you're going to have to add some
We are.
volunteers. I know how to work a rake.
There you go.
I can work a rake, and
Mow grass.
Mel knows how to work a hoe.
Perfect.
I had to clean that up. Hoeing, baby. It's working the earth. I'm going to have to pay for that one later. Obie said, I can't believe he did that. I can't believe he did that. Did I mention that we're live? This is live. It's going on. But Thom, it is such a pleasure to kind of dig into and being able to capture this and to share it with the group. And where can we go to get more information on your operation, how it works, how it thrives, or to be part of it?
Well, obviously our website, warbirdatventures.com, we will be announcing everything there as we progress through this transition. There will be no interruption in service. We will be providing flight training down here in Kissimmee until the very last day we're here. And the next day, we'll be providing up in South Carolina. So our students that are going to be coming with us, they will continue right away. We're not going to be shutting down at all. There will be activity all along. The museum will start shutting down here in a couple of weeks, and we're going to stop charging admission. The doors will still be open, but obviously during the mess and dust of the move, we don't feel that it's appropriate to charge people to enter the hangar. But we'll still be here, so come on by and see us. And if you feel like lifting a few boxes, we'll let you.
Strong mind, weak back, or strong back, weak mind. I can't remember how that goes. But it wouldn't be the same if we didn't talk about Groot. We got to bring up Groot because he's going to have 100 acres to run around.
That's right.
And we don't have any B-roll of Groot, but
I should have brought some. Yeah, Groot is our greeter. He sits on the little staircase in the office and greets everybody that comes inside. He's a 6-year-old Brittany Spaniel, and he owns the place. Yeah,
he lets you work
I'm his wingman. Okay. Yeah, that's how that works. I take him everywhere. He goes flying with me and everything I fly just about.
Well, it's interesting to see him stuffed. I haven't seen his. Yeah, I have. You got a picture of him in the Citabria.
Oh yeah, Citabria, Decathlon, RV, L-19, helicopters, you name it.
And I am anxious to see the Sky Ranch.
Yes.
That's one thing we haven't developed is what is this metropolis going to be called?
It's going to be American Dream Sky Ranch, and it's going to incorporate numerous aviation businesses, all of the exciting variety. And we're going to try to build a place where everybody wants to come visit and nobody wants to leave.
Does it like horses?
Chances are.
Okay, because we're going to have, because Mac, I know she deserves it.
Yeah,
She's worked hard.
absolutely.
And we're going to have Sky Ranch and stable,
There you go.
bed and breakfast. And are you going to be a RB? Are you going to be VRB?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I can't thank you enough, Thom, for spending the time with
Well,
us
thanks
today.
for having me.
Because there's other places that you could be, but I'm glad that you're here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Let's do it again sometime.
All right.
Maybe up in South Carolina.
Well, I think that sounds like a great remote for you.
Alrighty. We are going to wrap this one up. And again, folks, it's been a pleasure to bring this knowledge to you. And the one thing that we need to do is clean up. Remember that code that I was going to share with you at the end of the program? I'm going to share it with you now, but here's a secret. I don't really know how to do it. So we're going to have to let our crew figure out how to put this code up in order to let us share that code with you. And I can hear in the earpiece, but you guys can tell me what kind of code do I present to these people? Okay, he's breaking up. He's breaking up. The code it's on the videotape. Okay, thank you. Did I mention this was live? We practiced this about 3 or 4 times. No, we don't practice. We do it. But we are going to show it on a video at the conclusion of this. And after I say, thank you very much for joining us at Plane Time. Hope you enjoyed it. We certainly enjoyed bringing it to you and all of our volunteers here and the staff. Thank you. We'll see you next time.